I love my state. I love my state. But we have been on the wrong side of history for too long. And it is this young generation, rising generation of South Carolinians to whom your experience and perspectives must be transferred. We have, as I said, I'm returning to my text, a long history of doing the wrong things in South Carolina. And I'm not proud of that. I'm a 10th generation South Carolinian on my mother's side. But I acknowledge that some of the most deplorable ideas and actions in American history arose from our state. Not to dwell on the past, but to lay the foundations for present ills and a pathway through hope to a better future. Let me tick off a few of them, these bad ideas. Because if you don't recognize the problem's origins, you cannot approach the solutions. First, the importation of more slaves through the port of Charleston than through any other port to support the enrichment of the few through the labor of the many. The doctrines of nullification and states' rights over national sovereignty, which have arisen again in this session of the General Assembly. What a deplorable idea it was then, what a deplorable idea it is now.
Yes, sir. What?
Secession from the Union in 1860, the very nation whose independence had largely been won on the battlefields of South Carolina less than a century before. The firing on American soldiers at Fort Sumter, flying the broad stripes and bright stars of Old Glory, to begin a war that would claim 680,000 lives, including one of every 5 South Carolinians. And at the beginning of the Civil War, the governor, Andrew Pickens, said at the time of secession, "I would rather my state be laid waste to than to submit to federal rule." Did he get his wish? The embracing of Pitchfork Ben Tillman's successful abolition of the legal rights and property rights and voting rights and eliminating the Reconstruction's noble pledge to educate all the children of all the people and establishing South Carolina's first public education system, that was done in a state that had a majority African-American population and a majority African-American legislature for a short period of time until the Old South arose and took back the victories that had been won. Tillman's 1895 Constitution shredded the bright promises of Reconstruction and replaced human bondage with legal subjugation of freed men and women in the Jim Crow era. And resisting, in our time, the implementation of the Brown decision, which arose, of course, from Briggs' case in Clarendon County. Resisting it for another 10 years, spending millions of our tax dollars, until, as Governor Fritz Hollings at the time said, upon the integration of Clemson, we have run out of courts. And Clemson finally admitted my childhood friend Harvey Gantt was the first African-American to enter Clemson, followed by 3 African-American students in 1964, which we will celebrate at the university next year. Indeed, the state of South Carolina's lawyers, in rehearing the Abbeville versus State of South Carolina school funding case, about which Corridor Shame reports, last September defended the indefensible inequalities of a minimally adequate education in largely minority school districts. Once again, even today, official South Carolina stands on the wrong side of history All of this bad history is why we have a corridor of shame in South Carolina today. Unfortunately, all southern states, though different, bear a family resemblance. All are home to large numbers of low-income people, including disproportionately high numbers of African Americans. All have historically underinvested in public education. All have large numbers of low-income students who are especially ill-served by the educational status quo. All face the need to recast educational structures and practices to adapt to changed circumstances and remove barriers to equal and adequate opportunity. All must improve access and equity at a time when economic resources are limited and basic human needs are worsening. According to a study just a few months ago by the Georgetown University Public Policy Institute, 56% of all jobs in South Carolina will require some form of post-secondary education and training by 2020. South Carolina is caught in a low-wage, low-skill trap, a vicious cycle in which low-demand skills in the new economy actually discourages workers and employers from developing skills from education, training, and job skill enhancement. As a result, human capital development is discouraged and slow economic growth persists. It's a cancer. The implications for South Carolina are severe, with a majority of its public school students, and this just happened in the last 10 years, now living in poverty. And many communities which are deeply underserved suffer the most. Breaking out of the low-skill trap will be no easy feat. South Carolinians can escape this fate only by producing more post-secondary talent and by modernizing existing industries. If not, we'll see more brain drain as our best college and postgraduate degree students leave the state for greener pastures, and I know you have seen it in every family in this room, and who can blame them? Without more high school graduates becoming college graduates, we will not have a trained workforce, and industry will pass us by for other opportunities for the states that have prepared their human capital for the jobs and skills of the future. All of this is why poor states stay poor. Make no mistake about it. If South Carolina's state government does not make far greater investments in public education, we will be left with a third world economy for the rest of our lives and those of future generations. It's really all about math. Familiar phrase? Were you watching television in September? If South Carolina doubled the number of workers with bachelor's degrees today, it could see increased tax revenues between 75% and 150%, providing the resources state government would need and have available for better education, for quality health care and mental health care, and dramatically reduce poverty for the next generation. The jobs in the near future will come from, according to that Georgetown University report, from technology industries, healthcare, the sciences, engineering, and jobs requiring excellent, not minimally adequate math skills. The first steps out of poverty lead through the schoolhouse door, and never mistake that. I produced Corridor of Shame to call public attention in South Carolina to large numbers of poor people, including a disproportionately large number of African Americans, who as a group are still being inadequately served by the educational system at all levels. We're looking for a Supreme Court decision at long last this year in this school funding case to settle it. And my friends, nothing less than the future quality of life in our state hangs in the balance with that decision and with the responses to come thereafter from our governor and from our legislature. Even if we get a good decision this year, it will be the next several years to fight for the changes that the court mandates. Finding ways to advance the quality of education and tap into the tremendous talent pool that these deserving students and low-income people represent is the greatest challenge that lies before us. No state, especially South Carolina, can take its appropriate leadership role in the region or in the nation, or be a destination of preference for investment and business development as long as so many of its students are underachievers, unable to compete in the information-driven global economy, and lacking in the skills needed to function in a technology-dominated workplace. South Carolina needs to focus more attention on the bottom half of its students and do what is necessary to give them a better chance for a bright, productive future. Increasing investment in education for these students, making equity the center of our educational reform efforts, is everyone's and the state's interest. And it is also a matter of simple justice.
Thank you.
All South Carolina education reform measures must be assessed in light of their impact on or relevance to improvement of the educational quality and access for low-income and African American students. If equity